What's going on, Workforce? Brian here.
Chris here.
And today we're diving into the home of Final Fantasy XIV. Will always be on console, a new interview from Yoshi-P. And again, as always, click the link in the description below so that way you can go give them some love. But Chris, we actually have a sponsor for today's video, right? Why don't you tell them who's today's sponsor?
Guys, we want to thank Manscaped.com for sending us the perfect package kit, which came with their 7,000 RPM trimmer, waterproof, cordless, awesome. That's what you want from that. As well as ball deodorant. Don't know why that wasn't a product already in my life. And ball toner, which I had to call somebody to say, hey, what's this for? And they also sent us the 2 free gifts you'll get if you choose to move forward with our code. This bag here to keep it all in. Mine's got a little bit of toothpaste on already because I've been using this stuff for 2 weeks now. As well as anti-chafing underwear, which I've been using those as well. I have less proof on camera for that, but they are shockingly comfortable. Probably the nicest pair of underwear that I own. They've got stuff for your hair, your nails, your body, as well as they have a peak hygiene plan where you can get this stuff kind of, some of these things replaced every 3 months, as well as blades, because you wouldn't want this thing getting dull. So go to manscaped.com. Use our code WORK2GAME for 20% off, free international shipping, as well as the 2 free gifts if you use that today. And your balls and your body will thank you.
And again, thank you to Manscaped for sponsoring today's video, guys. Your blitz balls will thank you. And no, I'm not going to apologize for that joke. I love it so freaking much. All right, guys, we're going to dive into today's interview. As always, we're going to kind of just bounce it back and forth between the questions that are asked, and we're going to talk about them. Let us know what you think, obviously, and we can have that conversation with you guys as well. But Chris, why don't you dive us into our first comment? We can talk about it and we can go from there.
So, Official PlayStation Magazine asks, last time an expansion was announced, I was watching for a huge crowd in Las Vegas. For obvious reasons, this wasn't possible this time around. How did you find the change in pace with the Endwalker announcement? And Yoshi-P says, actually, to be honest, you may be aware, but we hired out a cinema for this announcement. And at the time, we really did want fans to be there. We wanted the fans to actually come out and participate in the announcements, but as you may already know, the state of emergency was announced in Tokyo, so that unfortunately put a spanner, which is just another term for a wrench, in the works. That really wasn't good for our plans, so we knew that there was a risk involved, and it was kind of unfortunate and did have an impact on the way we were able to make the announcement. You know, all of the fans were sending their responses and being so vocal in their support. That was really huge for us. We could really feel their response from the fans. I think the fans were really there to help us in this situation. When we look at how we usually do it at a keynote at FanFest, all the reaction that we get from the players, in a way, it was actually the same thing that we experienced in our digital channels on the 3 streaming channels that we had. All of the responses we really got from the players seemed the same. I personally feel it was a very positive response. Having said that, though, it is true that I went a bit over the time, and we did go a bit over the schedule, but I think it was a great response. In a way, actually having this reaction over the digital channels was helpful in some aspects. For example, if you're actually there in the event, you just hear people clapping. They're shouting, expressing emotion. That's good, but I don't get a clear view into specifically what they're thinking, like what points they want to know more about or what points are they really happy about. So by having them communicate with me directly, I can see what they're writing and what points they're being particularly vocal about.
I wonder, based off of that, because Yoshi-P always kind of goes above and beyond in his answers, giving so much more thoughtfulness in a way, and it makes sense because that actually is what threw me off in the event, because he was taking pauses to read people's reaction and see what they were guessing, and I thought he confirmed Blitzball, but he did not. He was just saying, oh, you guys are wanting Blitzball or this or that, and that was something I think was wholly unique to this moment, and hopefully when the world gets back to normal, we can kind of see maybe a hybrid of that for those who are watching the live streams, having giving him that real-time feedback of what's going on, along with our shouts and cheers and oohs and ahs and things like that. I think that could be wholly really interesting to see going forward, and that just being learned from obviously everything from 2020 and 2021 combined. All right. Endwalker is bringing this story arc started in A Realm Reborn to a close. Why is now the time to do so? And Yoshi says, to put a conclusion on the ongoing saga in Final Fantasy XIV, the Hydaelyn Zodiark saga was actually something that we decided quite a while ago. To put it simply, if we take an example of a TV drama, which he's used multiple times, if we're just dragging out the story and people aren't really going to want to watch it, then of course that's not really going to be good for them. Maybe, for example, we get up to a 4th season, but okay, then we decide to continue the fun until a 6th season or an 8th season maybe, and then people would really get sick of it. Really, you really wouldn't be able to stand it anymore. So that was kind of the sense that we shouldn't really drag this on for any reason at all, because it wouldn't be too much fun for the viewers to take. But of course, on the other hand of the spectrum, we actually need Final Fantasy XIV to be a success to continue. So, in the case of Final Fantasy XIV, if it isn't successful, then actually the company is going to tell us that we have to stop working on the game. So it's important to ensure that for the future of the title, that it's also very similar again to a TV drama. If the first season of the TV drama is not successful, then you won't have a 2nd season or a 3rd season. And in the same way, you actually want to make sure that 14 has a stable basis for success. In terms of timing for us, it was around Stormblood when we actually felt, we need to have a sense for that. You know, Final Fantasy XIV's success is going to prosper in the long run. It is really around that time, and actually that we were thinking that we should cleanly finish off the Hydaelyn Zodiark patch or saga, maybe in 6.0 or 7.0. But it was also around that time that we were thinking about this. So you guys might remember back in 2018, they actually asked, hey, some of the players thought, let's go to the moon. And he half-jokingly said, maybe in 7.0. But they were actually thinking about it at that time. And honestly, I think that's kind of interesting to kind of see. So then you might ask, why 6.0 instead of 7.0? And this was actually due to the impact of Shadowbringers. So, of course, all the fans really enjoyed Shadowbringers 5.0 so much, and seeing their response, we wanted to keep the momentum going. So I actually decided that it would be better that if we round off the Hydaelyn Zodiark story in 6.0, because we can then keep that momentum and we can have the players even more excited. But still, in terms of volume, there was enough volume to actually incorporate that into 6.0. So that was really the direction that they went in.
I mean, it's good to see them steering this and they're not totally locked in all the way out.
Mm-hmm.
You have to wonder how far in advance Breaking Bad knew it was going to end.
Yeah.
You have to wonder, stories that were not heavily, Game of Thrones, there's a plan, right? And they were working with books and all that. And so it was a plan. And whether or not you liked the execution of the plan, that was the plan. And you have to wonder if halfway into making that, they had been listening. They had a digital fan fest of sorts, and they had said, wow, we should really spread some of these story arcs out. If that last season would have been better received, because it wasn't the last season. There was one more after that, because they expanded on some of the things that people feel like they glossed over. And so I think adjusting on the fly is something impressive about this game for how big it is and how on the rails the final product feels. Mm-hmm. The final product feels very on the rails. Sometimes that's a weakness of the game, but actually, like, they really are laying the track just around the corner. We are always just around the corner, and they know off in the distance where they want to be, but the track's not laid, and it's getting laid continually anywhere between. Some things are getting implemented months before we touch them, and some things are years, but that's because how long does it take for that thing? Story, for example, they have to plan at a certain distance in the future, because then they have to go get it written, get it translated, deal with voice acting. They've got it as crammed as they can. 2 years is kind of the closest they can let it be to when we actually touch it. And this is just a good reminder. I remember that 2018 announcement.
Mm-hmm. So my thought here is, I don't know if anybody out there is a Parks and Recs fan, and there's other shows that do this, but essentially sometimes where, like, when I look at Breaking Bad and Lost was like, hey, it's successful. Let's just keep going with it. Let's just keep going. And eventually everybody's like, I don't even know what's happening. I've lost all interest in the story. And we've made that case here. Like, there has to be an end to this saga. Otherwise, at some point, like, no matter how much you love it, at some point, the people who are like, this is the best story ever, are going to be like, okay, we need, like, a story has a beginning, middle, and end, a conclusion. But in the case of Parks and Rec, like I said, is that one of the things I really appreciate about that show, other shows probably have done it, but I love Parks, so we'll use that as the example. They do a time jump where it's like, all of a sudden, okay, here's the characters that you know, and when they do a time jump, things have changed, and then the audience gets to rediscover their favorite characters in new ways, and having learned about past events. One example being like Leslie Knope and Ron Swanson's relationship being strained coming into one of the seasons, and a part of that mystery was unraveling what happened. Why is there some friction there? And so that ends up being like, okay, like you get to kind of come back from college and realize like, yeah, things have changed, and then you're kind of also rediscovering it, but you're kind of a stranger in a strange land. That was actually my experience from returning from college. I was like, yeah, I grew up here. Here's all my friends. And then it's been 4 years. People have changed. Life has gone, like things have changed. New people have come in, and it's like, I used to, go here all the time, and I'm back, and now I'm trying to work and stuff. Like there's dynamic shifts and power shifts and all those kind of things. And I think, who knows, maybe we'll see that. I've been having that theory, like, well, just shoot time for it a little bit, and then all of a sudden you get a new playground.
He says the show has to do well in its first season, but this one didn't.
That's a good point too. All right, take the next one, dude.
PlayStation Magazine says, "Are you hoping that with Heido and Zodiac concluding, it'll provide an opportunity for new players to jump in?" And Yoshi-P says, "Actually, that's something we've been asked quite a lot by quite a lot of media outlets, but I don't think that with the ending of Heido and Zodiac, our goal in mind is getting new players in. That's not the aim here." So again, you can actually think of it as a TV drama. Of course, the TV drama gets more seasons in there. You're going to still have the same cast. So I think people, if anything, I want to see, will say I want to see it from the start. Basically, they can actually have a look at this, maybe 6.0, and they can think about it. Oh, wow, Final Fantasy XIV is such an amazing game. I really want to experience this, and it would be great to experience that from the start. Of course, it really wouldn't make much sense if they entered halfway through and you got all these characters who, of course, they really don't know. So if anything, it would be great that they actually see the appeal of Final Fantasy XIV. And I think that it's appealing to new players in the respect that, they would think, oh yeah, I really want to get stuck in and started from the beginning to experience the whole story, the whole great story that we have to offer. So it would be great for new players to join and start playing from the start to really experience that great story. There's actually an interesting example of this. It's actually a trend for people pulling away from TV. They're becoming more interested in personal things that they find appealing, and they're actually getting more engaged in those activities. You can take an example of, in Japan, there's a really popular franchise now called Demon Slayer. You might be aware it was a huge hit in Japan, and now it's spreading across the globe. And so the interesting thing about that was that it was a manga and an anime, as well as adapted from that. It was actually interesting, and it only became a hit after the manga had been completed, so people could get in after the completion of the story, and they could actually see the appeal of it. It's a similar thing with Final Fantasy XIV. So the 6.0 story, people aren't really going to be interested in joining just to experience that, because it will be interesting. We really hope that people will actually join in and actually experience the story right from the start. So even in the case of Demon Slayer, I personally actually heard about it when it was becoming a very big trend, and they're saying, oh yeah, you gotta watch it. But I actually started watching the anime, and then I could see, yeah, it's awesome. This is great. So I think it's just perfect. The parallels in the situation that we have here in 14, really, it would be great to see people get stuck in the game and then really experience it from the start.
So that's interesting, because there obviously are some challenges to that. One of the things, and I'm not gonna, like, I know people might hear what I say and they're like, no, I loved AR. So did I. I loved it. And I definitely agree with that, like experiencing it from the start. But we do encounter a lot of people who feel like ARR is still, even with the changes, the crippling fact. It's by the time they, like, if and the thing is that if they make it into Heaven's Word, then they have this appreciation for it. And how do you have that? And so I wonder if in subtle ways, if he's also saying like, yeah, we're still going to continue to kind of rework that experience. Personally speaking, I would like to see more off the global cooldowns brought into your action bar, or changes to level syncing because of that nature of like, hey, go play in this space. It's fun. It's ridiculous. Yes, you're a little overpowered if you're already leveled up, but also you have a couple more things to do, because that's typically one of the things that people kind of feel like, when people say that the jobs feel right at level cap, but then you have some point on that direction there, it's asking a lot of the player if they're not invested in the story. Once you kind of get that hook in them, then no, I'm here for the story, and then all it turns out like it just keeps getting better and better and better, which ends up being kind of that pathway. Chris?
And Esoterics reminds us that some of this content could be better done in some of the ways we do things now. Now we have things like trust, we have bigger, much more in-depth scenarios in the game from just like gameplay elements than we did back in ARR. And as a result, you have to wonder if stories like Castrum and Praetorium would be better told through one of those tools. And so could you rework that content? So when I said on stream the other day, I personally wish they would get rid of MSQ roulette. Somebody's like, well, what would new players do? And it's like, well, no. I'm not saying like just leave them out to dry. I'm saying get rid of MSQ roulette. And then at the same time, implement a scenario that does that for people, because there's people right now that are using some tricks to skirt around and skip those cutscenes, and it's going back to that miserable experience. You go in there and you're just watching cutscenes, and it's just teleporting you repeatedly, and you're just watching cutscenes for 40 minutes, and you're not even seeing the boss fights. You're literally just teleporting cutscene to cutscene to cutscene, which is how it used to be, and that's why we got rid of the ability to story skip in the past. But people have found a way around that. That I'm not going to state here because I'm not trying to like forward that, but I understand how it works. It's not magic. Yeah. And so I think it's interesting to see him kind of push for it this way, because so much of Shadowbringers was about like, this is for the existing players, and that was definitely the focus.
Yeah. But
there was a handful of interviews that he gave that said, hey, this is for the people who didn't know the story as well. Not we're screwing the base. We're writing this for the base, but we put some things in there that would invite the me's of the world that did skip. And so like I'm obviously this is just one interview, but I would love to see that 6.1 acts as that on-ramp. I understand what he's saying here, and like translations, a lot of it is that like we're hoping this is a good excuse for new players to come in. I know that it's much easier to go into a TV show that I'm late to if it's already over, because A, I know how much I have to watch, and B, I don't have to put faith in that it's going to make it to the end without getting canned.
Right. Yeah.
Because the end is already published.
Yeah. That's what I told Julie. Like, there's been some seasons where I get hooked in season 1. They might get 2, and they never finish. It never has that ending or that conclusion.
Oh,
and so I just say, no. I'm not starting one of these TV shows again until I know that it's going to end. Which is, like, you have to have people who are going to be there. Otherwise, it's just not going to succeed, right? So we do love our early adopters here, our people who are consistently playing. All right, so... All right, the PS5 beta is coming very soon, perhaps sooner than expected. Was it important to have that version ready as soon as possible? Yoshi says, I'm just providing you an honest answer as a producer's point of view. When new hardware is out, there's not many launch titles available in the market, and with new hardware that's there's not much to play, right? So, also in the case of the industry in general, other companies are seeing what could be the benchmark, what could be the quality that players will want, and what will be the loading speed. And now all that will be optimized with new hardware. When the new hardware is launched, it will also attract new people to play the games that are available. For example, we will be releasing the PS5 version as an open beta, and the PS4, PS5 version free trial is available now, where players can go play up to level 60, and there's so many other things to offer in the game. So because that there's not many games available for the new hardware, why don't you just try to get the PS5 version of Final Fantasy XIV out there and get the hang of it, just so you can see what the game offers up as a free trial. Then you can just wait until the AAA big blockbuster titles come out on the market, and then you can try out those new ones. So, we just want to keep the momentum from the start, as a good chance for us to attract new people to get them on the trial of Final Fantasy XIV before everyone comes in with a PS5 edition of their games. Well
Pretty
played.
Perceptive.
Oh, it makes complete sense. It's one of the reasons
they're super good at adapting for PlayStation, right? This went from PS3 to PS4 to PS5. Like it's been there. It's an established game. They've got a live service budget, and so it's not Cyberpunk or something where they've got kind of one shot at this, and everything that they mess up is going to be held over them for all of time. Like 14's in a good position, and it's perceptive of them to go, okay, well, we looked at PS5 and the launch titles after all this camping intents to get a console, there aren't any games.
that
And
are
so-
specifically also taking advantage of the PS5 features. There are
What-
some, but yeah.
So what if we built a decent PlayStation 5 experience and got our game up there so fast that when somebody got home with their PS5 and goes, oh crap, well, what do I play on this that takes advantage of it?
Final Fantasy 14.
Final Fantasy 14 runs.
No subscription
Well,
required.
have you
Just
tried
download
it?
it for free.
Free trial's pretty big.
Free trial.
You should try it.
Epic. And that's actually one of the reasons why back in the day with new console generations, you'd usually see new IP launch first because people were hungry to try out new games. And later in the life cycle of the console, then it's like, like a lot of people are just kind of set. They're playing their thing. So that's it makes a lot of sense that Yoshi-P wants to have it on PS5 as quickly as possible. And thankfully, we only have to wait a couple more, like a month. Like we're less than a month away for that. So it is what it is.
Because of the way Game Pass works, if you had to pick one to launch, PS5 is the one more that works better on.
Mm-hmm.
Series X actually has a ton of titles that were ready to go because of the nature of Game Pass.
Mm-hmm.
So I would love to see 14 in Game Pass, just as a side note. That is not at all been even remotely something hinted at. I'm just tossing my wishes into the universe.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll see. We'll let you guys know because that would be epic, in my opinion. But I know there are definitely people who
Zero
don't agree with that. Zero evidence so far.
Possibly anti-evidence.
Anti-evidence. Oh yeah. She's like that wouldn't work. All right. Go ahead and take the next one, Chris.
As an MMO developer, what's exciting you the most about working with PS5 hardware? So really, as an MMO developer, the two big things that really appeal about hardware is, first of all, memory size. There's a huge increase in memory size. So that's very helpful for us in developing the title. There's also much faster loading speeds. Those are the two things we really need. I think there are also things that the player can really imagine would make an impact on the gameplay experience.
All right. That's give it more memory, more speed.
I think you can't say much more than that because MMO or RPGs are all about appealing to a wide array of players. It's why they have to make content available at a bottom level at such a casual level and then build in systems that allow the top players to play. That's why you have things like a normal version of a fight and a savage version of a fight, so that you can let the people who want to play the game on a hard mode play it, but you can still invite everybody in. And so as cool as PS5 may look, they have to have this game run on whatever their bottom hardware is. And the bottom hardware is not PS5. So it's exciting for the future of the game that where you have new hardware coming out. But it's not exciting for the present of the game because the present is still bound by min specs. And people are often like, well, I blame PlayStation. But there have been times in 14's history, depending on which point in time it is, where min spec was not set by the consoles. It was set by PC. People are like, well, my PC is super helpful. Great. Your PC is not min spec. Min spec is way low. There have been times where you go look up min spec and you're like, they really expect this game to run on that?
Core 2 or something like that. Good times.
You don't even have to have RAM. Like,
And the funny thing is that 1.0 was such a beast. It was such a beast. All right, so you're in a new unique position with 14, having been on the PS3. How does spanning hardware generations affect how you approach the iteration? So first, it really goes back to the design stage. As you know, the original Final Fantasy XIV, unfortunately, it was a failure. And we actually had to overhaul that and really rework it from the ground up with The Realm Reborn, but we were actually doing the design work for ARR, and we were working on the engine. And one of our goals was to actually have it run on low-spec PCs across the world. But at the same time, we had the goal in mind that we wanted to ensure that there was no loss in graphical quality, which for people would expect for a Final Fantasy title. So really, it was just about making sure that both of those things go hand in hand to actually work together. So we were actually the 2 points that we were really working on when we were approaching the design for the engine with 14. But with Final Fantasy XIV's engine, we actually designed it so that it would be scalable. And so based off the hardware that it's used, that it might be able to increase the number of characters on the screen or decrease the characters or actually increase the rendering area or decrease the rendering area in that respect. And that was a scalable engine that we had prepared. But unfortunately, we were actually a bit at a disadvantage with the PS3 architecture because the PS3 architecture was quite unique. Unfortunately, that forced us to undergo various tuning costs, and that was a bit of extra work on our side to accommodate, but things actually improved with the PlayStation 4, as you know. Sony actually incorporated architecture which is based around PC configuration, so it makes our job much easier using that scalable engine. So we can optimize the title for the PS4 that was much easier to process compared to PS3. And now that we have this kind of framework in place, when we have the hardware introduced that is relatively easy and to expand on the title, it can actually deliver the title on the hardware itself.
PS3 specifically, render distances was a big one.
Mm-hmm.
When PS3 was supported, when PS3 was setting min spec, because I think it was when we made the move to PS4 that PC dropped to min spec. But because it didn't have the ability to set render distances, there used to be a complaint that Limsa Lominsa looked like it was melting. And when they went back and added flying to ARR, they actually went back and were able to update the way Limsa looks at a distance. And so it doesn't look like that anymore. And it's a drastic difference. And you don't realize it until like you are somewhere and you're like, wow, this is really beautiful. And so every once in a while, there's something that's just shocking about a hardware leap forward. And that will happen again. We'll hit a point where we drop to whatever, where everything runs on a certain size graphics card or everything runs on a certain amount of RAM. And suddenly we're able to do something that we couldn't do before. There's more people in an encounter. There's, a crazy boss. And we're like, wow, why did they never do a boss like this before? And they're like, well, we couldn't.
Well, yeah. It was interesting because it actually, like, you would see people say, "Oh no, if you're on PS3, we're not going to bring you on the raid," because like loading times, reaction times. It just seemed like it, especially when it got to Heaven's Word, really struggled with the bigger zones. It really did. It was like, okay, let's go. Anyway, it's interesting because it's really good that PlayStation 4 I think really excelled because of its shift in architecture. But yeah, go ahead and take the next
platform. It's been a great platform. It'll be interesting to see. I think it's one of the key components when Brian and I constantly talk about a game coming to Xbox. It's one of the problems with the Xbox ecosystem is that the Xbox ecosystem currently, as a culture, supports all the way back to the Xbox One, the Xbox One S, the Xbox One X, and the Xbox Series X.
Yeah.
And so they're like, it's like, guys, pick a standard. Like we cannot take on 4 additional platforms. So no other MMO feels as dedicated to the console parity as Final Fantasy XIV. Why has it been so important to keep that approach? Very simply put, that it is because this is Final Fantasy. As you know, spanning over 30 years, maybe 35 years, this franchise has been on consoles. Really, the home of Final Fantasy is on console. Because of that, it's really our duty to ensure that people who are playing on console have an experience which is by no means inferior to those playing on PC. So really, we need to make sure that the people really do get the best experience on consoles as well. But actually, you may already know, personally, I'm quite a big MMO fanboy. I really do like my MMOs. Traditionally, there's been this view that MMOs are a very niche genre. They're really hardcore gamers are playing MMOs. I really wanted to change that outlook. I really wanted to change that perception of MMOs. I wanted to make MMOs more accessible to the general gamers. So in a way, I wanted to make the genre itself more popular. As a means to that end, obviously providing the title on consoles was part of that. People would usually think, oh, if I want to play an MMO, I have to play it on PC. I wanted to change that kind of outlook about it. So delivering on console as well, it played a part in changing the perception of MMOs, but that was actually more of a personal goal of mine.
I think that perception will continue on, and those goals would continue on with the game on Xbox. And hopefully we get to see that. Hopefully that's a news that we get to learn in May, but I'm not holding my breath. I'm just going to just go wait because
doesn't want to pass out.
Oh gosh, I know. Because
it's been years since they confirmed that it
might. Take a breath, Brian.
Yeah, we'll do it.
Oh, huh? What's the date? 20 to 30. Oh no. Oh my goodness. I completely agree with that statement. One of the things. Now, the only thing that's a kind of anti that is still that subscription fee in that regards, because that is still a hurdle. That's why I think the free trial is such a good proposition for people to try this game out, play it. The only weird thing is that if somebody has bought the game, let's say they're at level 40 or 30, and then they step away, they can't take advantage of that free trial time. And that seems to be a little bit of an awkward situation.
I think it's weird that Guild Wars 2, as a complete aside to this, does not run on console.
Right, exactly.
Like, it has less buttons on the bar. It was a buy-to-play that turned its core game into a free download. Why?
Why are we not there?
Like, why are you not on console? Like, 14 just really, and it sets the bar for what controller support can be. There are other MMO style games, there are RPGs that run on it. Final Fantasy XIV, in my opinion, has the cross hotbar system is astounding. It puts more buttons available to your controller in a comfortable way than any other layout. It's wonderful.
It's always a
desire
shocking.
to protect this desire to protect PlayStation players, this desire to protect controller players, even controller players on PC, is a lot of where people are like, well, they don't let DPS meters in the game because they're toxic. That's not actually the only reason. It is this continued effort to make sure that all players have the same experience, that no players, what was the exact phrasing, that they're not by no means inferior. Like that phrasing has come up. This is not the first time. It won't be the last time.
Yeah.
This ability to say, I don't care where you're playing. I don't care how you're playing. This is meant to be accessible to all players. And there is no subclass of those players that we don't want to respect. It's why Brian and I got so upset when there was that mess with the RP community feeling attacked by a couple of actions, because historically they have done such a good job of saying, as long as you're not hurting anybody else, there is no wrong way. And we want to make this game somewhere that you can really enjoy.
Absolutely. So as the game development gets bigger and more complicated, the gaps between numbered Final Fantasy games gets wider, but 14 always remains ongoing with updates. Does that create more pressure and responsibility considering the very visible part of the series? And with respect to the Final Fantasy franchise, I don't actually feel any responsibility. Really, when I think about it from a player's perspective, there is this kind of pressure for us to deliver a new experience with new patches, and with that, with new expansions. So with that respect, yeah, there is a responsibility that we have to deliver the best experience for players. But with respect to the Final Fantasy franchise in general, I don't really truly feel responsible for that, because Final Fantasy XIV is a title in and of itself. So I really don't feel responsible for the franchise, but of course it's important that we deliver the best experience to those who are playing 14. Of course, I'm also the producer of 16, and with that respect to that title, of course, I really do want to deliver that title quickly to the Final Fantasy fans, so that you do have a new title to play. But when we release 16, it's not going to be the end of 14, and we're still going to be developing and working on 14 to try and deliver new experiences for our player base. We really want to see those great experiences continue with this title, and we really are putting all in our best efforts to make sure that 14 continues, and that people will also have a great time playing the title itself. But, as you actually touched upon, because we are constantly updating 14, even after 16 is released, we'll be releasing more content updates on 14. In that respect, 14 is in a sense the latest Final Fantasy. So we will continue to work on delivering that content update, because 14 does have that as a standing in the franchise, and we will continue our best efforts on this title. Until, that number will seem old, and then we could change that number maybe. How about Final Fantasy 20? Well, that would have a good ring to it, and a while at least, it will keep us ahead of the game. Did Yoshi-P just...
We don't have a confirmation date for 16, but whatever that date is, we now know that 14 content is planned after it. And normally that would not be a big reveal, right? But what if 16 is like 8 years from now? Like Square Enix does that. We've called out, we've announced games and then been like, eventually. So it in my mind, it says 16 is close. It's a good reminder of that. But it's Square Enix close. And so in my mind, I also take that as a silver lining of like, okay, that's a reminder that 14 is not going anywhere. I think with the story ending with Yoshi-P having other projects, there's always a concern, no matter how many times they say it, that we could be seeing the end of an era. And part of me doesn't want that.
Yeah. On that note, though, pay attention to that line. I think we might see this come back. And whether it's 20 or 17 or 18 or 19, 20 does have a good ring to it. But he could have, in a way, like kind of just hinted at the fact of these conversations they're having. At some point, 14's still going on. It's still getting updates. He said that it's after 16's released, it gets its update. 14 is the latest Final Fantasy. At some point, he's like, yeah, they could just change the number. They could literally say, here's 14, here's 20, here's this connected world. Go nuts, have fun. Thanks for playing. I don't know. That's the dream here, and I don't want to get my hopes up too much, but they've got to be thinking.
It could
about
just be a branding shift. There are plenty of times that a company gets absorbed into something else, and the name changes over time.
Yeah,
it moves from being that company, a standalone product, to being that company part of a Square Enix family, to Square Enix presents Final Fantasy XIV, to Final Fantasy XIV, Square Enix's infinite online experience, to Final Fantasy Infinite Online. There is an iterative. So process, the game could just keep going and then just change the name if they wanted to, or that could be something new. It's always nice to hear that the game you're putting all of your time and effort into isn't going anywhere. Yeah. So that it's not a new statement, but this question it's nice to hear. Yeah. You're also involved in Final Fantasy XVI. Seems like a lot of Final Fantasy fans were pleased to hear your involvement. You and the team have built a lot of trust with the players. You even said at the reveal event you're committed to Final Fantasy XIV as your life's work. Do you think that open communication with fans is a part of the 14 success story? This is a softball question. Yeah, is the first word. I don't know how that came across in translation, but yeah. So actually, he's so generous. He always gives a long response, even when it's yes. So in a sense, having people that need you, that actually is important. It might be the company. They say, oh man, without you, we cannot make this game. We really need you to be there for us. And in the same way, that actually applies to the fans as well. If there are fans there and they say, we really want you to be working on this title, that is really assuring and really comforting in a way that serves as motivating for me to aim for higher places, to really aim for better things, provide better experiences. So in that sense, yes, having someone actually there that actually wants your support and wants you to be working on this, that actually helps me get my motivation and to deliver something really special and continue working on this franchise. So yeah, in that sense, it's important. But really, in the case of an MMO, it doesn't have to be an MMO. For any title that you're actually having on as a live service over a long span, it's not really a peachy experience to support a title for such a long time. You need engineers working on it. You need to be constantly providing new updates for it. So in that sense, it's a tough experience to be constantly working on it. But since the fans are there, and I've been able to cultivate this relationship with the fans, and we do have a sense of trust with our fans over these 10 years, that really does play a big part. That really is motivating for us to continue working on this title. Of course, would be a different story if they don't want to continue this ride together. But as long as the fans continue to express their support, that's really reassuring. And we can leverage our trust with the fans and continuing to provide an amazing experience by working on this title.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Trust is hugely
I don't know if that's actually how it's said. That's just how I read it.
Trust is a hugely important aspect within that. That's one of the things that he talked about with 1.0. They lost the trust. They took too many liberties coming off of 13. Going into 14, it's like, what is this game? What is this franchise? And it just felt like they were so disconnected. They have to earn the trust back. And the only way you do that isn't with speeches, it isn't with, even communication in a way. Like, communication is important, but it's not so much about what you say. It's about what you say and then what you do on that delivery. And then that's why 14 is the exception rather than the rule. Like, yes, Yoshi-P, they would have rather launched a really good game than had to have save Final Fantasy XIV and Final Fantasy in general. But now that you kind of have that aspect, you can kind of see that overall cost. Is it worth it? And it's really about developing the trust in titles. And you see gamers get burned by other games, and so they might not necessarily trust your game. And so you have to do a little bit extra work. You have to show, and then essentially, the words that you say have meaning. Like, oh, they actually did deliver on that. They did say this, and then this happened. Or something went wrong, and then they listened, and then they responded, and then they told us and gave us an expectation as to when we could expect a fix in certain areas. Trust is a huge important currency within the within gaming community. So is authenticity in that regards. And if you have those and you don't take advantage of those, yeah, you'll be beloved, and the games will be beloved because gamers feel like they can have that relationship with the game, the story, and the characters. Chris?
There's a consistency to it that's really admirable. There are other games that try to be this transparent, and then after 6 months, something happens in their game that's negative, and they get a lot of negative press, and they go, you know what, I'd rather just spend, these meetings are a waste of my time. I'm coming out and doing these live calls and people are just treating me like crap on the internet. I'll just spend that time working. That's a better use of my time. But there's something that said, like, we get 2 live letters for every patch. We get part 1, we get part 2. We get, letters from the producer around the anniversary. We get things around the expansion. We get these 3 FanFest type events historically. We get an enormous amount of face time with not just Yoshi-P, but with Soken and Koji Fox and all of these faces. There is a team that is built. And so, I can joke and I can laugh, like, yeah, obviously, but it is one of the things that sets this game apart. And it's something that is not about any one moment. It's not about any one moment they've handled well. It's not about any one moment they've handled bad. It's a lot more of a friendship. It's a lot more of a relationship where I'm not holding them to what he said in this interview. I'm not holding them to what he said in his last interview or in the live letter coming up on April 2nd. It's a trend. Because he's kind of banked all of this trust, he could misstep and on the second, and he could say something or even do something, and they could implement a patch that frustrated me. Brian and I have voiced frustration about this game before, and when it's people's first exposure to our channel, they're like, wow, you guys really hate this game. Brian's name is in the credits for 1.0. I've been playing since 2.0. His channel's put out over 2,000 videos. We've flown on our own dime out to have a chance to interview Yoshi-P. We love this game.
Yeah.
And so when there's a brief moment, yeah, there's a frustration like any other relationship, but there is a trust that this is a set of people in charge that care for this game and are going to do right by us, given time and given resources, and that we can have that faith that it is headed in a good direction. And so I can laugh and I can joke like this is such an easy question for those of us that have been around the community. But for somebody new, like, take note of this question. For somebody not familiar with this title, take note of this question. This is something that sets this game apart. This continual communication, this point that players say, you know what, as long as Yoshi-P and the people he believes are important are working on this game, I'm good. Like, we laugh about it.
Yeah.
That's an incredible strength that very few other titles possess.
All right, guys. This was an incredible interview. Again, go click the link in the description. Give the article some love. Thank you, Official PlayStation Magazine, for putting this together. If you guys want us to comment on anything, let us know. Always include, you can contact us, Discord, Twitter, all that, more, and good stuff. All right, guys. It's been early mornings for Brian and Chris because we've just been crazy busy this week. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like. If you didn't, hit that dislike button. And we just hope you have a great day. But for Work the Game, my name's Brian.
My name's Chris.
Thanks so much for watching. We hope you have a good one. But until next time.
Take care.